Speculation continues to swirl about an early election call. We don't know when it might happen, but we do know already that some MPs will not be running. Our next two guests have chosen not to stand for re-election. Together, they have about 4 decades of experience in Ottawa. Cathy McLeod is a British Columbia Conservative MP. She's in Kamloops. Wayne Easter is a Prince Edward Island Liberal MP. He's in Malpeque, Prince Edward Island. Welcome to you both.
Good to be here.
My pleasure to join you.
And let me start by saying congratulations. You get to pick the timing of your departure in politics. This is not something everybody gets to do, leaving on their own terms. You know, and Wayne Easter, I'd like to start with you if I could. I mean, you've served uninterrupted for nearly 3 decades now. I mean, how has Parliament changed in your time in the House of Commons?
Oh my goodness, it's really changed. I mean, when I first was elected, there was no internet in Parliament. We used fax machines, so there's that big of a change. And so you have the social media now, you have the internet, you have Facebook, and yeah, it's an information base for sure, but it's also a misinformation base. So it's really completely changed. And now, as Cathy would certainly know, we're in the West Block instead of the old Center Block. And what I've always said, you know, it is such an honor. Such a small percentage of Canadians has really had the opportunity to be elected and to sit in that place with its culture, its traditions. And that history is always there, but the place has certainly changed, and how you do your job.
Yeah, Cathy McLeod, on that point, you know, Wayne brings up the fact that the internet has changed things. Parliament meets because of the internet now, right? I mean, that's been the big change of the past year and a bit because of the pandemic. But I mean, I guess the same question to you. What have been the biggest changes over your time as a member of Parliament?
Well, certainly I'm about half the time as Wayne, so he had a lot more stick-to-itness than I did. I've been 13 years, and, you know, certainly cell phones were a part of when I first arrived. When you first arrived, the awe that when you looked at that building, Center Block, and you walked into the chambers or you walked into the library, and you knew that you had been elected by the people in your riding to serve, I never lost that sense of awe. And although West Block is not quite the same, you know, I think it's important that you every now and then take a minute to just remember you've been given this opportunity to serve and look at the surroundings, look at the history, the tradition, the culture. We don't always live up to it in terms of, you know, some of the shenanigans that go on, but truly it's an important institution and it's an incredible honor to serve. Not as much change as Wayne has, just more quickly ramped up in terms of, I remember old Peter Stauffer refused to have a cell phone and we didn't know how we manage without his BlackBerry. But again, not as much technological change, but certainly the last year has been a real change in terms of some of the challenges.
Do you think that's something that should continue, Cathy? I mean, you've got a heck of a commute from Kamloops to Ottawa, and hybrid Parliament certainly must ease some of that travel strain and time away from home strain. Is that something that should continue beyond the current health crisis?
I think we lose a lot with the hybrid Parliament. It was certainly functional. It was functional for a challenging time during the pandemic. I think that there may be opportunities where we can use the hybrid format for committees, as an example. Mm-hmm. When committees have emergency meetings in the summer, it always seemed a little crazy to fly all the way back, and you knew it was only going to be an hour meeting. But you do lose something in terms of the engagement, you do lose something in terms of the camaraderie, and you do lose something in terms of how MPs talk to each other and how they get to know each other. So, I think we can take some learnings and maybe use them to our advantage, but I wouldn't want to see a wholesale shift or a continuation of a hybrid format. Absolutely.
Wayne, I saw you nodding along
Just to step
there.
in.
What do you think?
Just to step in there as well. I agree 100% with Cathy, and we may have done away with the travel strain and some other strains. I'll tell you what we certainly haven't done away with is the eye strain of watching on these computers, especially if you're chairing a meeting with 25 people and you're trying to pay attention to it. There is something about being in Ottawa, if you're in the chamber especially. It even after all my years, it's still a little bit of an intimidating place, but it's also inspirational. Yeah, I don't like giving a speech talking to this computer, and in the chamber you tend to. I think you're more emotional. You tend to think more on the fly, and when you're in Ottawa, you also are rubbing shoulders with your colleagues in your own party and across party lines. And I think, in terms of, sometimes I wonder maybe the cabinet and the prime minister likes this way because you can't build the alliances to challenge your own party the way that you can when you're in Ottawa. You get together and you say, well, the 10 of us are going to bring this up in caucus. It's more difficult.
Yeah.
So, the other thing is how we vote. And if you're voting on something that's very powerful, like medical assistance in dying, or many of the legislation, to stand up and be counted in Parliament and to have people in the galleries watching how you vote is very, very powerful. And to me, it was a very odd circumstance to maybe be signed in on my computer and to press a little button in terms of how I was voting on something that was, changing people's lives. So I think that's another area that I think has been a bit of a loss, is the powerful vote and standing up to be counted.
No, I hear you on that.
In my early day, I got to bring this in, David. In my early days, I was a strong supporter of the Crow rate in the West, and the Chrétien government did away with it. And I told the prime minister I was going to vote against it, which I did. And I'm sitting in the back row, and just as I'm about to stand up all by myself, the Prime Minister Chrétien looks around at me, and I'll tell you, I agree with you, Cathy. Intimidating.
I hear you about the loss of personal contact, right? I think that's something we miss as journalists, right? To be able to go up on Parliament Hill and buttonhole MPs and talk to them, and on the ice train too, Wayne. I didn't wear glasses before the pandemic. Now I've got bifocals plopped on my face here. I blame that on all of this. But you're leaving, and you gave your speeches now because it seems like we're going to have an election, right? It seems like that's where we're going. So, Cathy, I wonder, we just looking ahead. I mean, what are the big things you think your party needs to overcome in the upcoming election if they're going to flip the House around and get back in government?
So I think, first of all, I chose not to give my speech, and I chose not to give my speech because, of course, we still have a pandemic, and we have a motion of the House saying there shouldn't be an election during the pandemic. So I thought if I gave my speech now, I would in some ways be condoning an election before we return in the fall. So that was certainly a personal choice. But, we're looking at, one thing I heard on the door last time was, I like your fiscal policies, Conservatives, but you need to be credible on the environment. And so those are some of the areas that I think our new leader is working on. We put out an environmental plan. So I think listening to the messages from Canadians in the last election and really being part of the changing times in terms of what we need to be doing, what we need to be focused on. Again, the fiscal was great, but let's see a credible plan in some other areas. And so hopefully that'll be part of a renewed interest and support for the Conservatives in the next election.
Yeah, I believe Peter Kent made the same choice not to give his speech, sort of as a protest that Parliament should come back in September as well. Wayne, I guess last question to you, same question. I mean, what do the Liberals need to do to either hold on to a minority or get back to a majority? What's the biggest challenge for them going into this election?
Well, and I wouldn't be absolutely sure there's going to be an election this fall. I think it depends on quite a number of factors. And I have always said that, look, there's absolutely no reason when you have four parties in the House why you can't make this system work, at least nearer to the end of the term. So I guess we'll see on that one. I think we have to do an awful lot better job of communications than we're doing in the Liberal Party. On the programming that we have done, I think we're doing reasonably well. Environment in this election is going to be a big issue, and I think we've laid out a pretty strong a plan on the environment, and we're there for people. So I think it's mainly on communications, on what we have done as a government during the pandemic and how we have those programs in place as we start to come out of it, and the economy has to remain strong.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you both for your time with me today. I congratulate you both on your retirement. Thank you for your service and wish you well in your next chapter. Thank you so much for your time today.
All the best. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.